coffee, wake up, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast. We finally reached my favorite season. I adored my own university experience, so watching Rory go to Yale brings back all the good vibes for me. I also love the other storylines this season with Lorelai and Suki opening the Dragonfly, all of the juicy drama with Jason, Liz and TJ getting married, and Luke finally getting off his ass to ask out Lorelai. Last week fights, this week tights is everything. But this week, we're kicking off with our coverage of season 4 by talking about university experiences and how Rory adapts to Yale.
Yep. It is back to school time again, so we feel it's the perfect time to talk about this topic. We're going to be discussing everything and every facet of Rory's college experience, from move-in day to her first class to her first college relationship, her first party, anything and everything between that first day and graduation. So if you haven't seen the show, this is a reminder that this is a spoilers all podcast. So if you want to dip out now, go back and watch season 4 and then come revisit this. And please remember to always do those YouTube-y things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel. It's one click and it really does help us out. Let's get to our synopses.
All right. Season 4, episode 1 is Ballrooms and Biscotti. Lorelai and Rory return from their Euro trip only to realize that Rory wrote down her move-in date wrong for Yale, and now she only has 36 hours to prepare. She and Lorelai spend the better part of 2 days shopping, packing, and running errands in order to get ready on time. Rory's Friday night dinner obligation kicks in now that she's back, and Richard and Emily are paying for Yale. But Lorelai is still busy completing the packing, and Emily takes offense to it, holding Rory hostage for her last night with her mom by making her watch old tapes of ballroom dancing competitions. Luke reveals to Lorelai that he and Nicole got married on their cruise, but that they're already getting divorced.
This is followed up by the Lorelai's first day at Yale, and the time has finally come for Rory to move into Yale, but she's quickly overwhelmed by the experience and freaks out when she's finally alone at school and her mother has left, so she calls her back. They end up ordering takeout from every restaurant on or near campus and invite some of the other girls from the dorm over for a night of fun and food. Luke is being hounded by Nicole's lawyers as she's filing for divorce, and then he gets roped into helping Lorelai with a second load of stuff for Rory as well.
That man will do anything for Lorelai.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. I love my own time at university so much. So, I love sort of the nostalgia of getting to relive it through Rory a bit. I still fairly vividly remember my own move-in day. Mm-hmm. And I loved it so much that I ended up volunteering for subsequent move-in days to help other people move in. Because it was just, so heartwarming to me to be able to see, the next generations of people at my school move into Totem Park. It was so nice. And then I also volunteered for orientations as well. UBC has this big one-day thing called Imagine, and everybody gathers in the hockey arena, and it's just this huge thing. Oh, I love it.
Mm-hmm. You had a very different experience than I did because you were actually on campus dorming all 4 years out of necessity because you were, quite a bit a ways away from home. But I was only ever living on campus for my first semester. And then I ended up transferring universities for financial reasons, which was unfortunate. But for the entirety of my college experience, I was actually just commuting and living at home. And the more I think about it, it had its pros and its cons because I saved money on having to take on that additional cost of living there. But I feel like I missed out on a lot of the socialization because of it, because I would essentially just go to my classes, do what was required of me in that regard, and then just immediately leave campus and go home. I never really stayed around for events or any sort of socialization or sports or anything like that. So there's a part of me that wishes I had, but then there's another part of me that was just I'm grateful for being able to also sleep in my own bed every single night. So it was a trade-off, but
yeah, it's definitely a different experience. I didn't live in dorms every year, but I was on campus every year until I actually did my university in 5 years, and I did summer courses every year so that I could live and stay in Vancouver over the summers. I never wanted to come home, basically. But yeah, I moved provinces. I wasn't initially intending on doing that, but it was a little isolating at first, but, I started to make friends in the dorm, and I stuck it out, and I eventually made it through the whole degree. And part of the reason I took 5 years was so I could do those things that you can really only ever do in university. I joined a sorority in my 3rd year, and then I wanted to be on sorority committees, and I joined Panhellenic as well. So I was like director of external communications for that. So I did a lot of like social media and stuff. And through that, I was a disaffiliate as well. So I was a recruitment counselor, recruitment guide. Well, actually, I wasn't fully, but like I was part of the people who were like, you sort of give up your letters for a couple of weeks to help potential new members go through the process in an unbiased way. So that was interesting and fun. And then like getting to reveal at the end was a huge, like, fun event. The Greek experience in Canada is a lot different than in the States, though. Like, from what I gather, it's far more chill here. UBC actually has the largest Greek system in all of Canada, and it's still not that big. It was a great time. I definitely see like the perks of it. Not everybody has that same experience, but it was great. And I was able to do stuff like sports. I played a lot of rec volleyball, and UBC has these events called Storm the Wall and Day of the Longboat. I was like, I know there's like another big one. So I did longboat a few times, which is like a 10-man canoe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was fun. And then Storm the Wall is basically like a triathlon that ends with a team trying to climb a 12-foot wall. It was interesting. But like, again, the things that you can really only do when you're in college. And yeah, living in dorms, volunteering for stuff, joining clubs. I tried to do it all. I tried to balance the academic with the social, and again, absolutely had the best time. And so, I would recommend that to people, but it's also not for everyone, and everyone takes different aspects of things differently. And that leads me into sort of like the first real point of discussion for this, besides just us recounting our lost youth, is Rory. How was her experience typical of the university experience? Was it not? How did she deal with the social aspect of stuff? We know she's into the academics, but like, how does she fare socially? Like, let's start talking about Rory a little bit.
I think just going to the socialization aspect of things and that first night, I think what Lorelai did for her was so incredibly clutch, because she was obviously just feeling a lot of stress being away from home for the first time, being completely out of her comfort zone, not knowing anybody. And I think sometimes we almost, make fun of her for calling on mommy to come back, but that's what she needed in that moment. And I think how Lorelai turned it around and then just invited all of her floor mates to like come over and just have food and hang out. Some of those girls might have been feeling the exact same way that Rory was. So they were probably really grateful to just have a night of like, getting to know people as well, socializing in that way, and even establishing potentially those friendships on day one. Probably it will help you so much down the line when you can even just see a friendly face in the hallway as you're going to class or just on your floor. It's really going to make that transition into that university experience so much better and easier for you. So I feel like, I know for me, like, I think a lot of universities will do things like that, like for their freshmen that first week, like orientation, mixers, arts and crafts sort of stuff, just to like get all of those incoming, first years together to like kind of just say, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I'm sure all of us are feeling this way. So I feel like that was a very good start for Rory. And I think it is emblematic of how a lot of incoming freshmen do feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Not everybody has their mom to come to campus and buy food for the entire floor. But you're right. It was nice. It was a good way for her to transition. It allowed her to sort of like settle in while still having a familiar element. And Lorelai just always knows how to make something fun. So she took something kind of scary and made it into something that was fun for Rory and her roommates and her floor mates. So I love that episode. Like today I'm repping good old Yale University. Just so nice. I didn't have that. If memory serves, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think my first night there was a big party and I got pretty drunk and everybody, so UBC has a nude beach and the plan for the evening was for everyone to end up down there and I didn't even make it that far. So
partied hard too early.
Yeah. The drinking age is a lot lower in Canada. So if any of you Americans are like how, why, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was coming up on 19, so which is the legal drinking age. So, yeah.
What do you think about? I mean, unless you have anything more to say about like Rory's first night, but what do you think about how she took in her first week of transition and how she approached her first class and you know, showing up extraordinarily early and just sitting there and then you know, wanting to like be so prepared and, you know, ready to succeed. How do you think she fared with that first week and going to those first few classes from what we saw?
I mean, I think that was the part she was looking forward to. She was a little more nervous about the social stuff and the dealing with the roommates and all that. But she was jazzed for courses. Like, I love how she said she stayed up all night reading the course catalog over and over. I mean, same. Like, it sounds like something I would do. She's very excited for that element, and it's very in character for her to go very early. Although, again, early classes in university are early. They're like 8:30. And so I'm like, why are you in class at 7:30 and you're like all dolled up? And why is Lorelai at Yale at 7:30 in the morning with a rug and catalogs and the Stars Hollow Gazette? Yeah, so that part, I think she seems to have gotten right into the swing of things pretty early. But then obviously she's thrown for that curveball a few episodes later when she realizes that one of her syllabi is like wrong. When I think that's George Bell who plays the professor in that scene. Shout out George. If you're watching, and we know you are. Yeah, and he's like, yeah, sorry, life's not fair, but all of your readings have been pushed up a week. And then she has to, that's the thing. She's gone from living in a single parent household and not having any siblings and having just peace and quiet to study, except for when Lorelai bugs her for ice cream. Just pure focus and space to herself. And she's gotten very used to studying in a particular way. And so when she can't do that anymore, she's like, the libraries are too big, too drafty, too quiet, too whatever. And so she has to learn how to adapt and focus in another way. I think that's something that is underrepresented or underestimated when you're talking about going to university. I remember it being a huge transition. Maybe it was less for her because she took AP, and so she was kind of getting used to the more rigorous course load. But just the structure of it is totally different than when you were in high school, and it's a very big shift to make from I've got like a couple assignments and it's really easy to going to be like almost completely self-directed. Nobody cares if you show up to class. That's all on you. Like there's no attendance monitor most of the time, and you're on your own to create your own study plans and your own deadlines and your own study structures. And like, I wish schools would do a better job of telling kids that. Like, I think we focus so much on the actual application process and getting in, and we don't prepare kids enough for what's going to happen when they're there. And that's a huge part of it, is like, you will be responsible for all of this now, and you have to, stay on top of things and chunk it out and find a study rhythm, invest in good noise canceling headphones if you have to. But those kinds of tips would be so much more useful than like, here's how to write the perfect essay to emotionally manipulate the admissions officers. If you haven't watched our episode on admissions, go back and catch that in our backlog. But yeah, I just wish that I had been more prepared and knew what to expect a little better. It was very different. And so I think Rory did a pretty good job adjusting, but she's just still so used to her own rigid structures and the way that she's always been used to doing things. And she doesn't handle change all that well.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I was going to pose to you, was do you think that Chilton prepared Rory well for the university experience, or do you think they prepared any of their students well enough for that experience? And if not, what could Chilton specifically have done better?
I think in a way they did, because they do have rigorous standards and they do expect a lot out of their kids in terms of how much reading they're doing and how much work they're turning in and how many things they're expected to juggle all at once, like with the extracurriculars on top of the schoolwork and physical education. All of these things are expected of them. And so it's good to teach kids to be cognizant of deadlines and to be used to high loads of reading. Like I remember just being shocked at how much reading I had to do in any given week. You have to get really good at that. And I think that their tight turnaround times and being like, read a Henry James novel in a week. Yeah, that'll prepare you for university. It actually will. So academically, in terms of workload and rigor, I think they did a good job. Whether or not their pedagogy was effective in terms of like asking them to do more than just sort of like writing book reports and regurgitating terms. Like I think to the Shakespeare exam, and it's like, nobody needs to know when these plays were written and published. Like that's all just background fluff that unless you're going to be a Shakespeare scholar, it's not as relevant to the content of the plays themselves. And it's just rote memorization. So I'm really hoping that there are more things than that. And then in the second season, when they're asked to perform Romeo and Juliet, like again, maybe because they have to find themes and interpret them in a creative way, you know, that's, I guess, problem solving, but it feels like a weird assignment a little bit. So I'm hoping that some of the other courses were better in terms of like, we're going to teach you how to actually critically think and how to write and how to, you know, write an essay with a strong thesis and a good structure. Like, I really hope that they were doing that. But like I said, I don't know how well they were preparing kids for university because, as I was just saying, most schools aren't good at that. And I think, you know, you hear Headmaster Charleston say stuff like, you know, we're preparing these students for life. Like, we're trying to educate your kid. And it's like, well, then prepare her, you know, like they're so set. So set in their sort of like classical pedagogical methods that they maybe don't like get, how do I face this? Like they're so like rigid that it doesn't translate as well to university. It's not as applicable to have someone sort of like on your ass all the time like that, because that's not the case. And so I think if they had maybe been a little bit more trying to emulate the post-secondary style of education, that would have prepared kids better.
Yeah, I agree. I think back to like even how I was prepared for high school. I remember being in 8th grade, and one of the things that they kind of instilled in you all year was like, once you get into high school, you're going to have to start writing a lot of essays and doing a lot of research on your own, as opposed to us spoon feeding you what you need to know. So here's how to write a strong thesis. Here are major and minor points on how to construct your paragraphs. And just know that when you get into high school, you're not going to have teachers necessarily who are going to be hand-holding you through this process anymore. You're going to have to do it for yourself. And I think that's something that Chilton does well, but I wish more high schools did well too. Stop hand-holding your students. I mean, it's good to want to see them succeed and invest and make sure that they can do the best that they can as they move on to universities. But if you're hand-holding them and guiding them through all of it, they're never going to have that independent streak and nature that they need to then go into college and know what to do on their own. And you need to be doing things even as basics as like setting your own alarm, making sure you're waking up early. Mom and dad are not going to be there to be like, get out of bed. You have to go to school. You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to know when your paper deadlines are, when you're having a test. It's very autonomous once you get there. And I think my high school personally did a really good job of preparing me for that. But I know, and I hear from a lot of times, like, and just reading things that students are just like, I went into college and I was like floundering that first year because I just didn't know what to do or what to expect. And I feel like, I mean, I can only speak for American high schools, but I feel like I wish the educational system for the 14 to 18-year-olds did better with that level of preparation.
Yeah, I floundered a little bit, and like I didn't do well in my first semester French course. And that's another thing that, like, I remember in the second episode of the entire series, Charleston's like, failure is a part of life, but not a part of Chilton. And so it's like, well, if failure is part of university, why don't you prepare kids for failure? Because I nearly failed my first year French course. I had taken core French at high school all the way up to grade 12. I graduated with the top grade in that class. And I thought my French was good enough to take a 100 level literature course. And it was not. I was in a class with a bunch of immersion kids. And it was a whole different world. I had to struggle to get through some of my first courses because it was such a change. And I'm not a morning person. I've never been a morning person. High school was a nightmare for that, you know? Those early morning soccer practices killed me. And yeah, nobody told me how hard it was going to be. And that it's another thing that Rory dealt with was the sort of like big fish in a small pond phenomenon in Stars Hollow. Like she was always the smartest kid at Stars Hollow High. And even at Chilton, like she started a little bit behind and floundered a bit and like, oh my God, I got a D. But then she came back. She finished in the top 3% by the end of her first year, graduated valedictorian. But then she goes off to Yale, where it's like literally just a bunch of copies of her.
Yep.
At least when it comes to like GPA and resume, not necessarily background, but it's like, you know, there's always going to be someone who is smarter or who has been doing what you've been doing longer or better. And that was something else she wasn't prepared for. She was always kind of sheltered. We just watched You Jump, I Jump. And, you know, I just remember Logan saying, you just seem a little sheltered. And I think that's absolutely right. She was sheltered in so many ways, both academically and socially. And in terms of life experiences, she just didn't have much to go off of. And so when she gets to Yale and it's this whole other world of people who are coming from all different kinds of backgrounds, and most of them from elite prep schools, private schools, feeders, charter schools, she kind of can keep up with them. But I think there's still a lot that she didn't expect in terms of the attitudes of other people or how competitive certain things were going to be, what it was like to get a bad grade on something and not have your hand held. Like when she goes to see her game theory professor and he tells her, like, I've spoken to your counselor. I think you're taking too many courses. And she has to drop a class. I dropped a bunch of classes when I was in university and I still graduated just fine. But she acts like it's the end of the damn world that suddenly she can't handle stuff. And so again, like Chilton didn't allow her to learn those skills, that resilience that you need. Like they help you get to university. They need to help you get through university. It's a very different experience or a very different set of skills you need to actually survive there and succeed and achieve what you want to. It's not enough to just get in or to help your kids get in. It's a whole different set of life skills.
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you just put that, like not just getting there, but then getting through it. I think that's absolutely right. And we will get to talking more about the, you know, needing to drop a class, eventually even completely dropping out and needing to take some time off. We'll get there. But I want to move kind of chronologically through her experience and pose this question to you. How do you think it impacted Rory, whether positively, negatively, if you want to talk about both, having Paris there with her as a roommate, as someone who was a part of her Chilton experience, comes to Yale with her, ends up being her roommate, one of three for that first year that they're together. How do you think that helped Rory and Paris in terms of having like them there for each other? Or do you think it was potentially a negative thing and they should have tried to be a little more like, let's do our own thing and not be so falling back on one another? And as a follow-up to that, do you think that it would help kids to maybe have someone going into their first year like that they know? Or is it just like too much of a scapegoat? Again, you're falling back on residuals, so to say.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a blanket bad thing to go to a school where you know people. I almost did that. And so, like, it's hard to say as someone who didn't do it what the impact might have been. I really did have to start from scratch. And, you know, Rory didn't really have to. I mean, I don't know that it made all that much of a difference for Rory. Like, her love-hate relationship with Paris made it complicated no matter what. And so, like, if it had been someone more like Lane, where she was really attached to her for a long time, I think she would have leaned on that a lot harder. Whereas with Paris, she was very resistant to being roommates with Paris, to like interacting with her that much and sort of being being there for all of Paris's university freakouts in terms of
Yeah.
like, I want to open the door for the first party, and I'm going to date a professor. Like all of that stuff she probably could have done without. It was, I think maybe it was more beneficial to her than she gave it credit for at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that she would have viewed it as like, oh, thank God I have someone from Chilton here, someone I'm comfortable with, because she has mixed feelings about Paris most of the time. So I think Paris was a great support to Rory, though. You know, they were able to share notes sometimes, and Paris was able to sort of keep her on track. And especially in the later years, like seasons 5 to 7, Paris is very much the one driving the bus on extracurriculars and making sure that they're, you know, achieving what they should be achieving at school, but also trying to have that experience. I think to her Operation Finish Line project in season 7, where she has like the giant whiteboards with like, we're going to apply to these fellowships and these master's programs, and we're going to get reference letters from these people, and we're going to have, but not only that, but we're going to have these experiences. We're going to go trace sledding, and we're going to go belly dancing, and we're going to go to frat parties. And so she's got this idea about the ideal college experience, and she goes about it in the most Paris way possible to try to make sure that they actually come away from Yale with some memories, but also while having succeeded academically. And so I think Rory underestimates the role that Paris played in her life in that way. So
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. Paris, it took them a while to get that friendship established and under their belt, and how we see it end up. And I think at least for that first year, it was very much more of a case of Paris needing Rory and just having that emotional and friend support system in place for her. But then I think in years 2, 3, 4 going forward, and even again, as Rory drops out and then needs to find her way back into her own educational experience, I think it shifted to becoming much more of Rory needing Paris, whether she knew it or wanted to admit it or not. And I think Paris being there as her like educational wing woman was what allowed Rory to succeed at the end of the day. I want to be confident that Rory would have gotten to graduation on her own and would have eventually passed all of her courses and been successful in that way. But I feel like there was so much significance and weight in having Paris there to just be like, hey, you know, go do the thing.
Yeah.
Like, let me continue to try and motivate you, because sometimes I feel like you're not motivating yourself well enough. And I think had Paris not been there, I think it would have taken Rory so much longer to get to that finish line and meet that goal, as opposed to, again, just having her there to prod her and move her along and keep her on track.
Yeah. And I think that maybe Paris benefited more from the friendship and the relationship overall. She was always so much more devoted to the friendship than Rory was, which is sad. We'll probably talk about that more sometime. Rory didn't always give Paris the respect she was due. But I think Paris was happy to have a familiar face in the dorm. And, you know, they continued to live together every year. So it's like, it's nice to know that you always have someone to do something with, right? But also emotionally, and having someone there to sort of like bounce off of, like when they're going through their relationship struggles, Rory is right there to sort of tell Paris when she's being a little over the top with things. So she helps balance Paris in a different way.
Yeah.
And Paris continues to help push Rory.
Yeah, they definitely had different things that they needed help with.
Yeah.
I think you said it best. As they went through those 4 years, you make an excellent point, Paris, especially with just establishing, you know, new relationships and new boyfriends and figuring out what that life is going to look like for her and how her partnerships are going to be. And that's where I think Rory definitely came in sometimes when she was, you know, with Asher, when she was with Doyle, just being like, sometimes you're acting a little bit weird. Maybe scale this back, try this instead. And I think that did allow Paris to be more successful in those romantic partnerships as well. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah. It's Richard even says it himself when Rory is going to host Anna from Chilton. And Lorelai suggests, like, I'm not saying you have to take her to a kegger, but like maybe do something fun, as opposed to just taking her to libraries and buildings and art galleries.
Mm-hmm.
And then Richard's like, you know what? I think she's right, because a good college experience is a well-rounded one. And so I think that's maybe where they help balance each other out a little bit and tried to push each other to actually experience things. We talked about this in our Am I the Asshole?
Mm-hmm.
But when Paris pushes Rory to invite people into their dorm for a party, like, not something you would expect Rory to do. And granted, she kind of moped the whole time, especially once Kik and Mickey showed up. But, that kind of socialization is a big part of the college experience. And granted, Rory's not much of a partier, but at least not at that point. But it's something new. It's something different. Even Lorelai has to encourage her and be like, don't just study. You have to have some fun and you have to meet people. And this could be a really great experience for you. So it was nice to watch them help each other open up in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to do further discussions about journalism. So let's skip over the paper a little.
Yeah.
And sort of around the end of season 5, beginning of season 6, we're going to do like basically a whole Rory arc with the burnout and the dropout and dropping a class initially. Like, we're going to talk about just sort of her process of going through those first 2 years of college and it sort of breaking her down.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get there. But I want to jump ahead a little bit to one of those quintessential experiences for kids. Let's talk about the spring break episode.
Yes.
What do you think of that episode on the whole?
I love that episode. First and foremost, it was so much fun, and it's always such a delight to see Madeline and Louise come back and show up.
Their last one.
Teal Redmond, Shelley Cole, I love the both of you to death. It was so great to have them back for this. And it tracks because, of course, these girls are just going to be like on a perpetual spring break. So when they're just like, yeah, we've been here a while. We already have our sleep routine established. We take midday naps so we can party all night. Like, I just loved having them back and seeing the four of them hang out again. I loved how they got there. Let's start off with that, how they actually made it from Yale down to Florida for spring break.
Yeah, it was another one of those moments where Paris started a little bit. She's like, it's warm in Florida.
Yeah.
Like, they've come from their first and only political protest. Rory likes to talk a big game about being politically involved and caring about other people. And yet we never see her beyond that do anything that's sort of not selfish or self-involved in some way. So they're having this, petition for Burmese political prisoners, and, they're just freezing. So they decide to blow some money and go down to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But Paris is the one who's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's hop on this bandwagon. And they get there and they're like, okay, wow, this is overwhelming. And we're sharing a room with a lot of people. And they enjoy the pool time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't we all?
Yes, we do.
And it's like the second night that they're there that we really start to see how they're not that committed, shall we say, to the whole spring break experience, because they decide to rent the Power of Myth and get a pizza. And they're like, are we doing this right?
I mean, to be fair, I have been, not to Florida on spring break, but I have been there. I did appreciate the party scene in my early 20s and going to those sorts of things. But especially for Paris and Rory, I can fully understand how those two specifically would just open the door from their motel room, take one look at what's going on around outside, hear all of the noise, and just be like, actually, nope. And then just
just noping out.
Let's just watch this and eat pizza. Are you doing spring break right? I'm going to say yes. You're doing it how you want to do your spring break. And there's something to be said for that. There's no right or wrong way to it. Just because everyone else is out partying until 4 a.m. doesn't mean that you have to. If that's how you're enjoying your time and you're having fun, more power to you. I mean, they did make it out to the beach. Mm-hmm. They did get some sun, get some color, thanks to, Paris just also dropping 20s everywhere to get, service and everything brought out to them.
Yeah.
So I think there was a good a well enough balance for them.
Yeah.
Even if it was a different experience from what everyone else was having.
Yeah. When they're sort of contemplating going home at the end of it, when they're drunk and sitting on the beach in the dark, they're like, we drank. Check. We kissed. Check. I don't think that's what they actually say, but they look at it as a checklist. They look at it as this is what it's supposed to be, as if there is only one way to experience it when there's not. And, as an introvert who sometimes needs to recharge her batteries, I totally get wanting to just curl up with a movie. I think you can do both. You can have the fun sun and pool time and beach time, and you can still go out to the club every so often. But, like, you don't have to go as hard as Madeline and Louise to enjoy a nice spring break vacation.
Yeah, I agree. I will also shout out just the comedy in that episode for how it was so interspersed, like Paris finding out what a banana eating contest really is. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Glenn coming up out of the water. Hot dog. Ah. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. And
The
Glenn
kiss.
even, go on. I was just going to say, like, Glenn even offering them the ride back, but them just being like, are you good? We're good. I think we can just fly home now. But yes, touch on that too.
Paris kissing Rory at the club because she wants to know, like, one, she wants to do something wild.
Yeah.
And two, she's like, how was I? Because, like, you can't ask guys. That seems desperate. Guys don't like it when you do that.
Yeah.
So, like, that's an interesting experience. Madeline and Louise are hilarious. They call Dean.
Yep. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on whether, that was right or wrong, but just briefly, like, what did you think about that moment with Madeline and Louise and Paris being like, oops, sorry, dialed him, and now she has to get on the phone and leave that voicemail?
I think, in general, it was kind of harmless, but I think the scene on the whole shows the stark contrast, because we have Dean, who's married and working and theoretically also trying to study, although he's about to drop out himself, at least temporarily. We'd never find out whether he goes back. Yep. But so, Dean is trying to be a responsible adult and has gotten married. And then we have these 4 19-year-old girls who are partying hard down in Florida. And it just kind of goes to show where kids of that age really are mentally, and that Dean probably shouldn't have been married at this point in time, especially with the fact that he's sort of very receptive to her call and is like, sounds like you guys were having fun. And I think maybe it's the start of him recognizing what he's missing out on by being married. And that starts the beginning of his downward spiral into wanting out of that marriage.
Yep, I would agree. Any other thoughts on that spring break episode? Other than just, again, I love it. I love everything about it.
I do. The whole thing is so much fun. It's kind of, it stands alone. It's unto itself. And I also love at the end when Rory's talking to Lorelai on the phone, and she's like, we hung out by the pool. We watched The Power of Myth. Paris and I kissed, and then Lorelai is fixated on The Power of Myth instead of like Paris kissing Rory. She doesn't care. She thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's kind of my last thought on that. Now I think I'd like to move us along to season 5.
Okay. And
talk about a little more about when Rory hosts Anna and shows, someone else, Charleston even says, like, she's bright, she's focused, she reminds me a lot of you. And so we get someone who's quite a bit like Rory, but she comes in and she is already starting to get very excited about the social aspect of school. She's excited about stopping wearing uniforms and going to parties with boys and all of these things, whereas Rory is always more academically focused. So talk to me a little bit about, like, the difference between Rory and Anna's experience at Yale those 2 days that she's there.
Yeah, I think Rory absolutely did expect someone exactly like her to be showing up. And so when Anna rolls up and she's just like, yeah, books are cool, but, like, where are all the parties at? Like, oh my gosh, like, you have boys coming into your room and bringing you food and doing things. And, where are the cool hangout spots? Like, that's not Rory's MO, but that doesn't mean that, like, you need to just have that be Anna's MO. Like, this girl is going to forge her own college path. She's obviously much more interested in the socialization aspect of things than you were starting out, but that's good. And I wish that Rory would have recognized that in Anna and maybe counseled her a little bit better, as if to, I mean, I do think Anna was maybe fixating a little bit too much on the party aspect of things. And, I think it would have been good for Rory to just be like, listen, that's good. Like, go to parties, meet people, have fun, but you have to not let that affect your studies going in. You need to be able to find a healthy balance between both, especially in year one, as you're navigating the waters of something that's going to be so completely new for you. And I think that Rory just counseled her not wrong, but just like not well at all, because she was just, no, we're not going to go to the coffee house. We're not going to go to a party. I'm not going to show you any of those things. Like, here are all the libraries. Here are all the books. Doesn't this look great? And it's like, okay, Rory, like, we get that that's good for you, but that's not good for her. So you need to counsel her a little bit better to say, like, yeah, here are some cool hangout spots that you should consider. Let's go visit the coffee shop. Maybe let's get a latte. Maybe you can get a feel for what that vibe and that scene is going to be like. Here are some of the study halls. Here are some maybe good restaurants that are nearby that you can hang out with other students at, as opposed to Rory just being like, nope, it's just all going to be all about the books for you because that's what it is for me. And so it makes perfect sense to me why Anna, towards the end of this episode, just is like, peace out, and then ends up going to her own party, and we see the consequences of that. But it's because Rory didn't counsel her well enough with the time that she had. Like, Charleston entrusted her with that responsibility to have her and show Anna that balance, and she didn't do it.
I mean, yes and no, because I think what you said, Charleston entrusted her with responsibility. And so I think she thought her responsibility was just to like give her a tour, show her classes, introduce her to the studying atmosphere and how different it is from Chilton, how big it is, how much you can learn. And of course, she knows that the socialization side of things is important, but she's also like, this girl is 16. I really shouldn't be taking her to parties. I need to take her to age-appropriate social events like the Froyo social. Mm-hmm. And so when Logan suggests, hey, take her to the college pub, she's a little bit like, I don't want to like risk crossing a line here with an underage girl and putting her in danger or trouble. Mm-hmm. And I guess it depends on what the purview of that was. But yeah, like a campus tour and like letting her crash a night in the dorm kind of, it feels like the right level of things. But you're right. She could have maybe done a little bit better in terms of just meeting Anna where she is mm-hmm. and being like, yeah, that's fun. And the other thing that Anna was doing that I think Rory did give her some good advice on was she was fixating a little too much on like, you can do whatever you want. You can stay up late. You can have 4 cappuccinos and 3 Red Bulls. And, you can go to parties with guys and guys can come to your thing. Like, I love it. Like, there's no consequences. Mm-hmm. And there absolutely are consequences. And so it was good of Rory to sort of show Anna that, yes, college is fun, but it also comes with a level of responsibility. And I also don't necessarily blame her for sort of enforcing or reinforcing the academic side of things, because at the end of the day, you're paying like 50 or 60 grand a year for an education from some of the brightest minds in the world. And that's not nothing. You know what I mean? Yes, I advocate for balance and for not burning yourself out mm-hmm. in trying to get this sort of like rarefied education. But you also have to respect that like your tuition, I mean, some of it goes to some social stuff because, there are disbursements for things like that to subsidize events for students. But, the bulk of it goes to paying your tuition for actual coursework and for campus maintenance and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you are there to get an education, and your education is just as important or more important as your college lifestyle. So Rory understood that. And that's part of the reason she did drop out. She's like, I don't want to float around Yale with no direction mm-hmm. because it's very expensive. I don't want to like just take courses willy-nilly. I want to be focused. I want to be on a path. And so she wanted to make sure that Anna sort of understood the gravity. Then again, when you come from a family that has all this money and wants to send you to private school and then an Ivy League education, maybe you're not thinking about money so much and you are just thinking about having a good time because there are no consequences for things. Look at Logan, he could kind of afford to dick off and drop out for a year and sail daddy's yacht and sink it. So I think maybe it's just a level of privilege that Anna comes from that Rory didn't, that gives her the idea that like it'll be a hedonistic free-for-all. So I don't know. There's again a balance to be struck with these things, but I think Rory was trying to keep it like on the up and up so that Headmaster Charleston wouldn't think poorly of her and so that she wouldn't get this young girl into any trouble.
Well, fail
A little bit.
Because Anna, as we see at the end of it, ends up getting arrested for being underage at a party. So way to go, Rory. I mean, it's not really Rory. It's Rory's fault, but it's not her fault because like you should have been supervising her a little bit better, but Anna should have also just
known better
herself. So
yeah, I mean that she's 16. She's away from her parents, possibly for the first time. She probably lives. I expect her to be kind of like Paris, you know, where she has strict parents who expect a lot of her. And suddenly she's free from all that and she gets to see the fun side of college or wants to experience that more than the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so I can see why it happens. But I think Rory loses her focus because of the whole Logan thing. And it's just like, I need to chew him out, so I'm going to let you go off on your own on campus without a cell phone, because this is like 2004 or 2005. And, you know, she takes her eye off the prize. She drops the ball. She should have been like, I'll deal with you later, Logan.
Yeah,
I have more important things to deal with right now. Like, just leave us alone. And, yeah, so I think Rory could have done better on that front.
Yep, and agreed. As we move on to a different topic, also just shout out to Marty for being there to just be like, yep, let's go find her.
Yeah.
You know?
Marty occasionally.
Good guy Marty.
Comes in. Yeah, he doesn't stay good guy Marty all that long. But yeah, he came in clutch in that moment. So, yeah. Let's kind of shift a little bit to like Paris maybe.
Okay.
And talk about her experience, because I think we're going to get to more of Rory's later experiences in other episodes, and we will talk about graduation separately as well.
Yeah.
And like sort of the fears of the real world after college, because we definitely see some of that. But to continue on with Paris, she again views college as sort of a checklist of experiences to have. I'm thinking of the football game when she shows up and she asks Rory to take a win-lose photo. She's like, I'm already so bored that I'm thinking of transferring to Princeton just for fun. Like, just because I'm so bored. So what do you think of Paris's experience? Do you think she did it right? Did it wrong?
I think a little bit of both. I do think that she could have done better with just engaging in things like that. Like, I understand, look, we'll start with the football game. Sports is not going to be everyone's forte. That's hard for me personally to understand. But I get it. You know, but sometimes I think the cost benefit, like, that you can get from attending an event like that, like, you know, you don't have to go for the football, but you can go for, you know, the socialization aspect of it and just like the tailgating aspect of it. And maybe some, like, you know, it's likely that maybe some professors are going to be there. Maybe some, you know, advisors from the university, other students who are there that you can, you know, talk to about like, well, how do you think this class is going? Like, let's say potentially Paris is thinking about taking a course in, you know, preliminary legal studies next year, and she meets students at the football game who have already taken that course. You can pick your brain on what's it like? Is it worth my time? What's the professor of that course like? You know, there are things to be gained from it that you might not expect if you just take the time to go to those things. But like you said, she rolls up and she's just like, we won. We lost.
We're done.
You know, that's where I think like Paris could have done a little bit better with just like put yourself out there a little bit more, because even if it's not a particular event that interests you, something, you know, that you don't expect might come out of it, you know?
It's true.
I do think she did it right in regards to especially acknowledging when she needed help over the course of the 4 years and bringing in Steve. We like to call him Stove.
AKA Terrence.
Yep, the life coach. But I actually want to applaud Paris for that, because she was noticing in herself, and perhaps like, maybe her family to an extent, but I think mostly her, I think she was noticing that she was going to need some sort of assistance to help get her through those 4 years. And if it meant bringing in a life coach and that's what was going to be beneficial for her, I applaud her for recognizing that in and of herself, because university and those 4 years, like, it's tough. I don't think we even tell maybe high school students, going back to what we said in terms of, do we prepare them well enough? I don't think we really educate young people on just how difficult it may be and how rigorous it can be. And especially when you are attending a university like Yale or Harvard or Princeton or Brown or any, school that's going to be so much more rigorous and strict with their expectations and what they want from students. It was good to see Paris acknowledging, I need help and assistance here to get me through this time, beyond what maybe Rory's going to be able to provide, beyond what maybe even like a school counselor who's talking to hundreds of kids might be able to provide. So I'll shout out her first and foremost for bringing in Terrence and helping her through the 4 years in that way.
Yeah, I think someone there to help her work through her emotional stuff was probably good. I think we underestimate the impacts of mental health in university. I had my own struggles. And if I had known sort of what was going on up there at the time, I think I could have managed it a lot better. And so I think, and we'll talk about this more, we are going to have, again, an episode on mental health, and we'll probably talk about this with burnout as well, but just sort of like whether or not people are supported in their mental health at institutions like Yale. Spoiler alert, they're not. So yeah, having a life coach was a very interesting step for her to take. And it did show some self-awareness on her part, which is refreshing for a character on the show to be self-aware and to have someone help them through stuff like that. I think in general, she did it more right than Rory in a way. She was laser focused on school, but she also knew that like there were other kinds of experiences to have as well. Especially by senior year, she was very focused on not only just like getting through her courses and getting to graduation, but on what was going to come next. And she was very devoted to Operation Finish Line, whereas Rory was like, I don't really care about this. Like, I have one path and I'm sticking to it. I'm not looking at any other options. And Paris was a lot more practical about the realities of what comes after grad. So I think she did a really good job of seeing the bigger picture with university. She still kicked ass at her courses, but she knew that there was more to it than that. And, she went speed dating and she went belly dancing and she went on spring break and she had to sort of like drag Rory to some of these things, drag her along with her. I think Rory was always just so complacent, just thinking like, this is enough. And Paris always knew that it wasn't. Whether it was at Chilton and saying like, everyone who wants to get into Harvard is going to have the same strong GPA. You have to do more. You have to do more. She recognized that when it comes to life as well. And so we don't see her struggle as much in terms of like keeping up with the coursework. And not only that, but I think she had a double major in like biochem and poli-sci. She ended up going on to not one, but 2 postgraduate programs. She became extremely successful. And here's Rory just being like, I'm just going to graduate and hope I get this one fellowship for 6 weeks. And then who knows, you know, just very one note. And Paris was determined to have a well-rounded experience and to not let her 4 years at Yale define her, but to use them as a springboard for something bigger.
Yeah, that is an excellent way to put it. I'll follow it up with saying this. Who do you think in Paris's life during these 4 years influenced her the most and allowed her to have that success? Like, who was the most influential? Would you say it was Rory? Would you say it was Doyle? Would you say it was Terrence or some potentially Asher? Because he was an instrumental part of her university experience as well, and in a few ways that are just good, but not so great.
Yeah. Interesting, shall we say?
Yeah. But where do you think she was, like, where do you think she gained the most influence and support from that allowed her to be as successful as she was?
I'm going to give you what I think is an interesting answer. And I'm going to say it's Paris.
Yeah.
Did you like read my mind and see that coming?
That was my thought, but like,
yeah. At the end of the day, the buck stops with Paris. She's the one who decided to bring in the life coach. I think she got the idea from her rabbi or something. She says she got the idea from somewhere after Nanny moved away. And so, like, yeah, he helped her. And, you know, there was Jamie and there was Asher and Doyle as her romantic leads. And Rory was kind of always around by default. But she was the one who had the drive and the self-awareness. And even when she fell short in any way, she recognized it and she knew. And she's like, I need to do different, do better. And she was the one who was responsible for her success. And everyone else is just sort of like, there is a cheerleader, which isn't a bad thing. I applaud Paris's focus and determination and spirit, because she didn't have it easy. Her parents were out of the country for most of her university experience, and she wasn't getting a lot of support, but she had so much internal strength that was born out of years of neglect, unfortunately. And she had her struggles, but she was so resilient. Like, oh, it's so sad. We'll have to do, like, obviously a deep dive on her psyche, especially at Chilton, because there are some moments that really stand out in terms of like, oh, wow, you were just like a hurt, broken little girl right now. But she really worked through that.
Yeah.
And did the work to become what she became. And I'm very proud of her for that.
Yes. Snaps for Paris. You go, girl.
Speaking of sororities.
Yep. Is there anything else about Paris or Rory that you want to highlight on as it pertains to what your typical American student goes through throughout those 4 years? Anything else that you want to touch on, whether it's good or bad?
I feel like that's probably good for now. A lot of the other stuff will slot nicely into more specific episodes, so we can save those examples for other stuff. But I want to talk about one more Yaley. Good old Richard Gilmore. You know, the OG, the original Gilmore at Yale. Well, actually, no. His father also went to Yale.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of is an interesting point as well. The choice of where to go to university, legacy is one thing in terms of nepotism and like connections and having an alumnus in the family. But I think part of Rory's decision to go to Yale in the first place was not just because Yale is a great school or because it was easier for her to get in. That didn't matter to her. And obviously it was a moot point because she got in everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think what is neglected in the legacy discussion a little bit is how it's sort of a desire to be part of something bigger. It's family history, it's memories, it's, you know, a desire to experience things similarly to things that those you love have experienced. And I love Let the Games Begin when they go to Yale and Richard points out all of the things that he loved when he was there. He says that his years at Yale were the most gratifying of his life. He still clearly just absolutely loves the institution. They go back every year for the Harvard-Yale game. They have all of these traditions. And so it's about feeling connected to your family legacy. And that's something Lorelai didn't really appreciate about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were the practical perks of going to Yale, that it was closer and that she could come home more easily on weekends. But it's funny because they talk about it being nice that she could live at home and then she never lives at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just, I love that she ended up, well, I don't know if I love that she ended up choosing something like that, but I think it is more indicative of why people do stuff like that. Lorelai didn't care about it. She wanted to do something very different from her family, but Rory was more connected, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I like that she made a decision on her own based on her own values of family and connection, instead of letting her mom's feelings about her parents influence her so much that she missed out on a connection opportunity with Richard.
Yeah, I do think that there were instances where Richard slipped up and did things that he shouldn't have, like, orchestrating that interview for Rory at Yale when she was just not even knowing that it was coming and then was unprepared for it. I feel like he did innately push for her to get to Yale for, because it would just please him to see his granddaughter following in his footsteps in that way. And Lorelai was doing the same thing. Both Richard and Lorelai were guilty of just like, trying to prod her in the direction that they wanted her to go, as opposed to just being like, what do you want? You know? But I echo what you said. I think at the end of the day, Rory chose Yale not because it was Richard's desire for her, but because at the end of the day, with all of the schools that she had been accepted to, that's what was going to be the best fit for her. And I'm so happy that Rory made that decision her own, like you said, as opposed to being pulled in one direction or feeling like I made this choice, but it wasn't really my decision. I just did it because I knew it would make my grandfather happy. And it did make Richard happy, but it was still her call at the end of the day. And I love that. I think it allowed her to be in a better headspace going in, because she knew like this was my choice to make and I made it. And so she was able to have all of those moments of connection with Richard that were really just heartwarming and good to bring them together. And I do love the Harvard-Yale game when she really sees why Richard loves the campus and why he loved his years there so much. And I'm glad that it brought them together in that way. But I think the most standout point was just highlighting that like it was something that Rory decided for herself at the end of the day and made her own.
Yeah, I think that's an important conversation to have with kids who are contemplating university. And Lorelai kind of dropped the ball there because they had, again, just one singular idea for however many years, 14 years, for Rory to go to Harvard. And she didn't allow for the idea that Rory could possibly want anything else, that she could possibly want to go to Northwestern or USC or, have any of these different experiences that might have actually been beneficial for her, or to go to a school with a better program for journalism. Like apparently Princeton is better for journalism. Why wouldn't she go there? So they were just making a decision based on a brand name, essentially, when it comes to Harvard. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. You need to pick a school based on what you want out of life and what kind of experience is going to be best for you, whether that's community college or state school or Ivy. Like the Ivy League isn't the end all be all of education. And if we expect it to be, our cheat code to life and to success and prestige, then we're going to set ourselves up for disappointment, failure, mental health issues, breakdowns, like any number of issues. If we're doing things that are not sort of driven by our own true desires, just because they look good and shiny to the outside world. And I think they were too focused on that. So, if you're thinking of going to school, like you have to think, where do I want to be? What's going to be the best experience for me? Like for myself, over the last few years, I'd been looking into going back for my own master's in library sciences. And I made an entire like spreadsheet and I ranked schools based on like 20 different criteria in terms of like how ideal the program was for what I wanted, but also on the lifestyle factors and the financial factors, because all of these things are important. And it's not just about prestige, although I ended up wanting to go to the most prestigious of the schools because it was closest to my family and it was like the most convenient and the campus was the most attractive to me. So it wasn't about its ranking in the world or whatever. There were so many more things that were important to me that it still ended up coming out on top of. But it felt like a very Rory Gilmore thing to do when I made that in the first place. And I had like whole ranking systems for it. But, ultimately, I don't think I'm going to go through with that because, the panini has changed a lot of my priorities. And I think that's an important thing to remember too, is like, you can go to university and you can change your mind about things. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about Rory's dropout. But I think that being too focused on a brand name or anything super specific is not good. And you need to really contemplate what your life is going to look like, because it's not just about studying and it's not just about what kind of name is going to be on your diploma at the end of the day. This is 4 years of your life. And tens to hundreds of $1,000s worth of your money.
Yeah.
So you have to be very thoughtful about it. And I don't know that they did the best. We talked about that a little more in our admissions discussion as well, but keep that in mind if you're like thinking about going back to school.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the bond with Richard, and I love, you know, how he sort of tries to involve himself in Rory's experience. It's a nice thing. I love when he shows up at the end of Not as Cute as Pushkin and is like, Logan, I heard you proclaimed your feelings for Rory.
Yep.
We're going to have a dinner and finalize the engagement.
Yep.
Like, just, you know, the sort of roguish youth that he tried to reclaim there. He's like, I love this place.
Yeah.
It brings out something in him that we don't always get to see. And I love when they go to different events at the school, and even when he comes in to be a professor, like, it just seems like such a lovely place for him. And he often recounts his own memories of school, like one of his roommates being a rather chubby lad, more fat shaming, love it, and how they like tied him to a mattress and threw him out the window every night for a month until he dropped out and transferred. And just he would keep telling his own stories, and he was part of the Whiff and Poof, so like he had his own whole experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's where he met Emily and proposed to Emily, and their whole family lore kind of starts there, where he ditches Pennell and Lot for Emily and her blue dress. And so that's part of the family history that Rory wants to be a part of.
Yeah. I am very, very glad that Richard was so supportive of Rory on her journey and her educational experience. I would like and hope to think that even if she had chosen Harvard, that they would have still been behind her and supporting her as much. We'll talk about it, but I say this too because I also want to preface it with this, and made me think of this. I did see, and this is why I feel like it's so important to be making your own choice when it comes to post-secondary education and choosing the path that's going to be right for you. But I think it's also so vital and crucial and helpful for any student who is making that decision to have that familial support behind them if and when it's at all possible. I understand sometimes, you know, students are going at it alone, but it made me think of, like, I actually did see, and it broke my heart. I saw this video about 2 weeks ago, and it was a young man just coming out of high school who had been recruited by 3 different universities offering him a basketball scholarship. And so it was a video of him sitting at that table. You know, ESPN is recording like these young people's choices, and his mother is standing right behind him, and his mother is decked out in like full, I'm not sure exactly what university it was, but I believe it was like Ole Miss gear. And so it's like very clearly like, you know, your mom went to Ole Miss. She wants you to go to Ole Miss. It's one of the choices that's presented to this young man on the table. He was offered a scholarship from there. And we see this young man pick up the Florida Gators hat as that school. That's the school that he decides to go to, and he puts his on, and that's his decision. His mother immediately just walks away from him out of frame. And this is like live TV too. And she's just like, nope, not having it. And we see this young man sitting there, and he just is instantly so deflated. Like, he just dropped his shoulders. His head went down. You could tell he was probably crying. And his like brother was standing behind him, just having to try and console him. And it broke my heart because it's like, you know what? Like, F you, mom. I'm sorry. Like,
it's not about you, okay? You had your time.
Your kid made the choice to go to Florida because that's what's going to be right for him in this moment. How dare you do that to your son? It broke my heart to have to see that, because that is going to stay with that young man for his 4 years at Florida, knowing my mother is disappointed in me. She never wanted me here. I can't imagine what that is going to do to him during his time here. I hope he's able to bounce back from it, but you never know. So that leads me to the question of, do you think that Richard and Emily would have been as supportive of Rory had she gone to Harvard or Princeton?
I mean, I think they would have eventually gotten on board, and they would have been supportive of Rory because they know, like, Rory can do what she wants. She's still at an Ivy, you know, it's still okay. And, but like the reason I sort of made a face when you first brought that up was I was like, ooh, just the rivalry on the football game thing. Like, they're going to be on opposite sides when that game eventually rolls around. But I think it is, you know, that story you just told is kind of the opposite side of the coin of that legacy discussion is like how the parents or grandparents or whatever it is feel when their legacy is not taken up. I mean, I get it, because like ultimately it should be the decision of like whatever is going to be best for you, and it may not be what was best for them, but they feel a loss, or they feel like, I really wanted to share this with you and now I can't. And so there is a little bit of a grieving process that you might have to go through with that, but then you have to get over it and be like, ultimately it doesn't matter. We're still going to be connected. You're still getting a great education. You're still succeeding. And like, as long as you're happy and things are going as you want them to go, that's ultimately the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I have another one that I think is an interesting conversation. Let's rewind a little bit.
Okay.
And go back to Rory's first trip to Harvard. And the reason I want to talk about this, I mean, obviously we see Rory in her element. She loves it. They see the dorm rooms and she sits on a philosophy class, and she's so thrilled to be there. We knew that she was going to love it. We knew she was going to fit right in. But I don't want to talk about her.
Okay.
I want to talk about Lorelai.
Okay.
Because Lorelai was also really getting in the spirit on this and like pretending to be a college kid and just trying to like ingratiate herself on the campus. She's looking for apartments and she's judging people for wanting a quiet place, you know, and she flirts with a law student.
Yep.
She's like, I think I'm going to like college. And not only that, but when Rory's sitting in the philosophy class and she goes to the washroom and she walks by the photos of the graduates and she sees, you know, the class of 90, which is what would have been her graduating year from college if she did the 4-year thing. She's obviously disappointed that she maybe didn't get this experience. She wanted it and ultimately didn't go down that path. And it eats at her. And so now she's living vicariously through Rory, not only at Harvard, but at Yale.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting conversation to have about, you know, it kind of spins off of the whole, like, what your parents want for you thing. I think Lorelai's going to have fun with it no matter what. But what do you think of the fact that she didn't get a traditional experience? And what was she missing out on by doing that?
I mean, first and foremost, maybe a potential earlier partnership in her life that would have allowed her to settle down more, find that right person earlier on. I mean, you know, I think we all, or at least a lot of the fandom, like stands Luke and Lorelai, but there's also, I think, some of us who say like, you know, actually, no, maybe Luke wasn't. I think she missed out on like a lot of the dating scene and just, you know, potentially like one night stands if she had decided that's something that she wanted to, you know, if she felt that was right for her and she wanted to have some of those, like maybe some of those, you know, dating and going through boyfriends and finding out like, you know, what do you like in a guy? What do you not like? You know, what's going to be a good fit for you so that she doesn't go into her 30s. Like we see her still being like, I don't know what's right for me because I haven't dated, because I just had to spend a decade plus raising my daughter. So I'm still unsure of what I want in a man. So I think she just missed out on so much of that when I think it would have benefited her. And I think that she largely probably wanted it, but just, you know, how, you know, she says it in one of the episodes in season 1, she's like, I don't bring men back to the house because this is Rory's house too. Like I have to be cognizant that she lives here and I'm not going to bring someone into this house and into her life who's not going to stick around. So I think she missed out on a lot of connections and relationships in that way. That might have been good for her and might have allowed her to settle down better and find that happiness sooner than she did. I'm glad she eventually got it with Luke, but she could have had it sooner.
Yeah, that's certainly one element of the socialization process at university. You know, everybody kind of dates around. They learn what works and what doesn't. Some people marry their college sweethearts and it goes very well for them. And ultimately she does go to college and she gets an AA degree in business, but it's a very different experience because, you know, it's a commuter college and she's in her 30s. So it's not that college experience. And I am of the mind where it's like, it's never too late to get an education. So
Right.
like you can always go back to school, I think, for things at any time if you want. But I also think that you only have so many years to sort of be young and to experiment like that. And I think college is a great way to do that. I learned so much about myself in my years at university. And it was such a transformative experience. Like, this kid from small town Ontario moves out to a major cosmopolitan city on like the edge of the continent, and just like one of the most stunning places.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a change for me, but it was like the experience of a lifetime. And, you know, had I skipped out on that and taken some time off or worked or not gone to school immediately and I wanted to go now, it would be a very different experience. And so I think you only have so much time in your youth when you're unencumbered and you don't have as many responsibilities to just like really soak up the experience. If that's the experience you want to have, I fully endorse, you know, hopping right into it and getting in the spirit of the thing, because it's great if you want it. And Lorelai never got that. And it, like, you see her clinging to it so longingly. And it's very interesting, because I also think, coming from so much privilege that she denies, would have allowed her, if she really wanted to, she could have hired help. Her parents could have raised Rory more. She could have gotten more of the college experience. Or, you know, dare I say, she could have had a very different experience in the first place and not had a child.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's just more preventative action or more like focus, staying on that path and like not getting pregnant in the first place, or other options that are not really words we can say on the internet without being censored. So, you know, if you catch my drift, she could have had other options if she really wanted that experience. And now she's looking back like, what did I miss? But at the end of the day, she has Rory, who she thinks makes up for all of that. But you definitely see her trying to sort of piggyback off Rory's experience to have some of it for herself.
Yeah, I'm confident that, you know, any day of the week, if you asked Lorelai Gilmore, you know, would you trade Rory to have those years back and those experiences back? I'm confident any day of the week, Lorelai would outrightly say, like, no, Rory is my life. She is the reason why I wake up in the morning. You know, the sun shines because she's in my life. Like, I don't have any regrets about her existence. It's just about having regrets over the missed experiences because she knowingly took on that responsibility. And that was her choice to make. Like you said, she could have chosen something else. She chose to have this child. So it's always tough when you don't want one to be a direct causal link to the other, but in this case it is. So I feel for her over those missed experiences, but I think at the end of the day, she'll always say, like, the trade-off that I made and the choice that I made was worth it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I may have those moments of regret and longing for a life that could have been and those missed experiences, I will never say, like, actually, no, I wished I wouldn't have had Rory. I don't think we would ever hear those words escape her mouth.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's the what is lost, but what is gained kind of moments. But you can also see some sort of longing when talking to Richard about it, or when Richard's recounting the story of her taking the diploma out of his office and be like, I'm going to go to Yale just like you. So, you know, part of the reason their trip to Yale is so hard for her when he goes behind their backs to set up that interview is that Lorelai missed out on that herself, and she makes this moment about herself instead of being like, oh my God, what must Rory be feeling right now in terms of, like, is she nervous? Is she ready for this? What is this doing to her? Instead, she makes it about like, oh, like, I'm your loser daughter, Gilmore name sullied, I'm stupid. You know, she just sort of goes into that defensive posture of, oh, clearly my dad is doing this because I was such a loser and I didn't do it. So now Rory has to. And it seems like when she was younger, she wanted that for herself. She wanted to go to Yale like her dad. And then she never got to, and then takes it very personally anytime they talk about it.
Yeah. And I think it's sad, but I think Richard and Emily unknowingly perpetuate that in Lorelai, where she constantly lives her entire life with that feeling of, I never lived up to your expectations. And it harbors resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, you know, they had so many years apart before they re-entered each other's lives because of the Chilton financial arrangement. But even after that, I feel like that's why they had so many years of continued conflict, because in the back of Lorelai's mind, I can always just see her raging with the thought, like, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I'm sorry I never lived up to your expectations. I'm sorry that I wasn't the daughter that you wanted me to be and I failed you. But can you please just not make me have to feel guilty about that every single day of the week and every single time we interact?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that's what we did get from Emily and Richard, was just a constant guilt trip and reminder of what they perceive to be her just innate failures.
Yeah, the fact that she didn't go to an Ivy was a big hit to their egos, ironically enough. But all right, I think that's pretty good on Lorelai, at least for now. I want to talk about one more real quick, because I think it's a very different experience than you typically see, and then we'll wrap this up. I want to talk quickly about Lane and her Seventh-day Adventist adventures, thanks to Mama Kim. Yeah, that would have been an interesting experience, 2 parks, one for boys, one for girls. Wearing nail polish isn't a major offense anymore. You can work off the demerits.
Wow.
So, what do you think about Lane's experience? Because it was obviously short-lived, and then we kind of see what happens with her in the revival. What do you think about her experience, or lack thereof, and how that impacted her both in her college years and beyond?
I actually think she probably handled everything that was thrown at her in one of the most healthy ways that we see, as opposed to Rory even, or Paris. I feel like she went into that initial experience and did that because it was what Mama Kim wanted for her. And so I don't love that it was kind of a forced thing where oh, I'm doing this because I don't really feel like I have a choice. My hand is being forced. But I feel like she came out of it, even though it was a very brief thing, still just not knocked down to the point where she's like, I can't even get back up because this experience has just depleted me. And I just feel so discouraged by it. And now I don't know what I want to do. She rebounded every step of the way in her life, I feel like, extraordinarily well, in terms of asking herself the constant question, what is it that I want to do? And I do want to be cognizant of what my mother wants for me and what I feel is right. But as time went on, she just started making more and more choices for herself and living the life that she wanted to. And I think that pursuit of her own personal happiness it did so much for her in her life. And I feel like it took a while, but eventually we do see Mrs. Kim get on board with, these are the choices that my daughter is making. It's not what I want for her, but she starts putting her daughter's happiness and well-being first, and she does get there eventually.
Yeah. I don't think Seventh-day Adventist college was right for her, obviously.
No.
I mean, again, college isn't for everyone, and she wanted to be a rocker, but I'm also a little surprised she didn't at least try to go study music so that she could really understand the theory and maybe try out some other instruments or just learn more about it. She's basically completely self-taught on music. She clearly has a natural inclination and aptitude for it. So, maybe she doesn't need formal schooling if all she wants is to be in a rock band because, well, she's already in a rock band. But we see her later in life still living in Stars Hollow, working as a salesperson for her mom, which, I remember she took that aptitude test in season 2 or 3, I think. I think it was end of season 2. She talked about it. Her whole this is the 3rd time I've taken this test, and every time it's come up sales. And I'm like, please tell me that wasn't foreshadowing, and that this was the plan all along to just tank her life, to take over the antiques business or to work with her mom, to still live in Stars Hollow, raising her twins with her kind of dopey husband. I don't see her in the revival as particularly happy. It's one thing if you're totally cool, that is the chill lifestyle you see for yourself, and you just have a genuine passion for sales or antiques. Like her mom clearly has a real drive and a passion. She started that business with her husband, and they rock it.
Yeah,
that is her thing. But it is not Lane's thing. It never was.
Yeah,
and so to see her sort of hamstrung with 2 kids and a husband instead of going off somewhere else and studying music and becoming some kind of virtuoso, it's a little disappointing to see that happen for her. You're right. She does start to make more decisions for herself, but sorry, sky raisin, as we like to call them in this house. The cat used to kill them, but she's old now and no longer has any fucks to give. But yeah, she doesn't necessarily use those opportunities to assert her independence in such a way to like advance her life. She only does it in a way to be like, okay, at least I'm free. I'm living in my own apartment with my bandmates and I'm working for Luke and I'm playing music. And as much as playing music is a passion for her, she doesn't take it anywhere beyond that. Their band never really takes off. You know, maybe she even could have gone and studied like music management or something in terms of like the business side of music to help with their marketing or their CD covers or something, like something artistic where it like very much fits her and would give her the skills and credentials that she would need to advance her personal passions.
Right.
But she doesn't even do that. She just sort of like, again, is complacent, and she works a low-paying job at the diner just to survive and tries to get the band off the ground. And even when it doesn't, she still doesn't try to push herself out of that or further from that. She doesn't actively go after anything more that we see. And by the revival, she's just sort of like, well, this is it.
Yeah.
This is life.
I would have absolutely loved to have seen more self-motivation from Lane. I don't know why we didn't get more of it, because she does seem to me like someone who is so resilient and can draw upon inner strength that I think we all know is there. Perhaps we've talked about it before, how Lane was just not written well towards the end of this show and in the revival. They really kind of dumped on her entire arc and what could have been for her and what her life probably should and would be looking like if she was written well. I feel like I would have loved to have seen writing where she does, you know, become like, you know, her own little boss ass bitch. And she's like, I've got this. Like, I'm going to, whether you said go back to school to study music or find a job that pays me more so I can, you know, get better equipment, that I have more flexibility to be on the road doing music on my own terms in the way that I want to. That's an avenue that could have been taken. It's another thing, you know, when she gets pregnant with the twins, going back to what you alluded to with Lorelai, she could have chose a different path for herself as opposed to being a mother. But that's what we got. And it seems like, as unfortunate as it is in the revival, I'm sure she, to an extent, you know, I'm sure she loves her boys, and, you know, there's a part of her that does enjoy motherhood. But I think it wasn't her destiny.
Yeah, it really feels like they just decided to be lazy with her arc and her threads. And they're like, no, we're just going to have her working down the street from her mom so that we can continue to have her engaging with Mrs. Kim. Because she just can't sort of like cut the cord fully. As much as she wants to be her own person, she does struggle with letting go of her mom's expectations for her. And she does love her mom and she wants to be close to her mom, but like, go to Hartford and study at the college where Lorelai was. Take something that would help you earn more and do more if that's what you want to do, because you seem so disappointed that sales keeps coming up for you.
Yeah.
Then change it. Change your life. If you want to make a change, do it. Don't just be like, well, this sucks. Because I think to that moment when she's at Yale with Rory after the CBGB gig and it doesn't go well and she doesn't have an excuse for her mom to go out all night, and she chills with Rory at Yale and she's like, look at what you have here. Look at this life you have. I have no life. I have nothing. I have no backbone. She recognizes that she yearns for more. And her first instinct when she goes back to Stars Hollow is to move in with the band and get a job at a diner.
Yeah. I think we just need to chalk it up to lazy writing that just didn't allow for that self-motivation and progression and growth that I think we should have gotten from Lane.
Yeah, like that was a real moment for her. And they could have taken it and spun it off to like Lane being a boss ass bitch and like taking control of her life and going to school for what she wants, or at least trying to get a job that she wants. Luke's is just a default option because it's there and because it's approved by Mrs. Kim, you know?
Yep.
It's not enough of a departure for us as the audience to feel satisfied based on what we know she's capable of.
Yeah. And it's something that you said before, but I want to highlight it for, it's never too late. You know, her boys are not going to be boys forever. You know, if and when we ever do get a revival 2.0 at this point, she's probably going to be sending them off to college. I don't care that you're in your 40s, that you're in your 50s. Do you? Like, if you still want to, I mean, look at what Gil was doing. You know, he was in a similar situation, middle-aged man, you know, family, wife, kids, still rocking because that's where his passion was. That's what he wanted to do. I would love to see something similar for Lane, where she takes, you know, learns from the experiences that she has, but still, even as a middle-aged woman, is like, I want to rock and roll. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Exactly. It's not about, you know, formal education being the end all be all of life. You can learn a lot on your own, but I'm a big proponent of education. I want to go back to school. Like, I love being at school. I love the formality of it. I don't know, I'm weird, but I don't think I'm the only one either. So,
okay, Hermione.
Yeah, pretty much. I went to the library for a little bit of light reading. Smell it. Nothing smells like that. Yeah, like you don't have to go for formal education to be successful. And so I'm not totally disappointed that Lane didn't finish college, but I also think it could have been an avenue for her to take to improve her own life, because it seems like by the revival, she's just existing. She doesn't seem to have much real verve anymore. Like, early seasons, Lane is so peppy and so motivated, and then she loses that by season 5. Like, the rest of it's just gone, and then it's just all about drama with Mrs. Kim and Zach. When, you know, she had so much promise and just could have tried to use that as an opportunity to gain the skills that she would need to like really catapult Hepalian out of Stars Hollow and into something bigger that's not just a circuit of Seventh-day Adventist churches up and down the Eastern Seaboard.
Yep. I think that's a good summarization for Lane, unless you had something else with her that you wanted to highlight.
No, I think that's about it. I think we should wrap this up because we've now crossed the 90-minute mark. So as much as I still have to say on this topic, I will put it into another episode.
Yep. There was a lot, especially going back to Rory, that we didn't touch upon with, not even with her, just with Paris and Doyle. We didn't really talk about the Yale Daily News at all, which was a huge and significant part of their educational experience. We will get to it when we have our journalism episode. We have so much more slated down the line for just these types of experiences in general. I know we have a law one that we'll eventually get around to that you are going to just live for.
Yes, we have a law one and a justice for Rory one specifically, where we talk about her legal issues, and then another one for like all the other legal issues on the show. So like, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of good stuff in the works. But what we just said is a bit down the line. What is directly next for us next week on the Gilmore Way?
Next week. Normally we wait until the middle of a season to have a special episode, but in light of the Emmys coming up soon, we've decided to have a little award show of our own. So we came up with a handful of categories, mostly production, acting, casting, those kind of categories, and decided to name some nominees of our own because Gilmore Girls was way underrepresented at award shows, and we think there are so many things that deserve to be recognized and shouted out. So we're having our own little award show.
Come join us for that. Another really good thing that is literally just weeks away now, the Firelight Event, hosted by FanFest in Algonquin, Maine. We are rounding the corner on it, folks. It is literally less than a month away, or just about that as of this moment. I don't have a specific day counter in front of me. But if you have not purchased a ticket to that event or want to find out more information about it, we've included a link in the description below. You can come for one day. You can come for the entire weekend. But if you want more Gigi in your life, this is the way to go about it. So please consider buying a ticket to that event and consider showing up on Sunday.
Yeah,
because
we're going to be running Gilmore's Against Humanity. So if you're into Cards Against Humanity or What Do You Meme, and also Gilmore Girls, you will be delighted.
That's the panel for you.
We've been busting our butts to find the best, the funniest, the most irreverent jokes from the show that we're going to turn into our very own Cards Against Humanity game.
Yep. So we hope to see you there for that event. Again, more info on that in the description below. And please just always remember to do those YouTube-y things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, share this video with your friends and family, anyone who loves Gigi as much as we do, because we always appreciate that support. It really does help us out. That being said, enjoy your weekend, and we will see you next Friday for dinner.
Bye.
Take care.